So here we are talking, when they recruit somebody, they go through the history of your family spanning centuries. But at the same time, I don't want to elude anybody, because I know that there's a lot of people that go and say, oh, I have an ancestor here, an ancestor there, I'm going to have a DNA test, and suddenly they're going to all respect me because I am the bloodline of this and that. It doesn't work that way, guys. Forget about it. It doesn't work. I mean, it would be nice. It would be great, but it doesn't work that way. It works in a different way. It works like, of course, family connections. I was 23 years of age, and I got recruited by a family friend who was a Prince Aliata di Montereale, a family friend because this family has been friend with my family for hundreds of years. So it's not just, oh, hey, hello, let's become an Illuminati. No, it doesn't work that way. So I got brought into a specific place. I got initiated. I got instructed. And then later on, I started this process, which brought me to be initiated. I mean, I was actually very eager to get initiated in many traditions of the West, or what we define as the Western initiatic tradition. And I was pretty positive about staying within the fold until 2003, when in one of my initiation, I started to see that there was human sacrifice involved, and that kind of, I draw a line there. I kind of draw a line.
I'm Rai, your Codega, here to lead you through the shadows of the unknown. My journeys have carried me across hidden corners of the world to places steeped in wonder, whispers, and unanswered questions. Walk with me as we uncover ancient civilizations, unravel unexplained phenomena, and chase the legends that refuse to die. Welcome to CODEGA'S Codex of Curiosities. All right, everyone. So today's one of those shows where I thought I was going to have a good handle on this. And then I started digging into the material and I realized, this might get just a little wild. Okay. So we're going to be talking about secret societies, maybe power structures. And we're going to be talking to someone who says he didn't just study this stuff himself. He was actually inside it. Okay. And honestly, I don't even think we're going to cover everything today. This might turn into a whole series if he's on board or if everyone else is on board as well. We'll see. Okay, but before we jump in, if you guys are enjoying the show, make sure you're following, drop a rating, all that good stuff. It really helps get these kinds of conversations out there. Okay, so let's just jump right into this. I want to welcome Leo Zagami to the show. So Leo, welcome.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to meet your audience and you.
Fantastic. I stumbled upon you through Brad Olson with his CCC publishing, and I was like, okay, your writings and your books look very intriguing and very interesting. And so I reached out to you, and here we are. So before we get too far, why don't you tell my listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself and also maybe where they can find those books as well.
Sure. I mean, I'm an investigative journalist and author with a past experience within the secret societies you commonly refer to as the Illuminati. You can find my articles and the links to my latest books on leozagami.com. I highly suggest you go and check it out regularly because I update it often with new articles of interest that refer to my books, but also to what is going on today. I have put together a series called Confessions of an Illuminati. I started with Brad Olson the first 3 books in the English language. And then, of course, I picked up from there. And now we have concluded the series last year with volume 12. Now, books like volume 12 can be read on their own. You don't have to read all the others. So I suggest you start actually from the last one, going backwards, which seems to be a favorite of a lot of friends of mine. And then, of course, I finished with the Confessions of an Illuminati series. I went back into writing essays on topics that I might have touched briefly in my books. Like, for example, this is a topic, Sabbatean Frankist, Jeffrey Epstein, which I briefly touched in volume 7 of my Confessions, which I have behind me, but it's this book here. And then, of course, I wanted to dedicate a whole book to this specific subject. And this is what I'm doing now after I have concluded the Confessions of an Illuminati series, which is a enormous amount of work that probably requires a lifetime to study. It's like an encyclopedia of secret societies, of how they operate, of who is on top of them, and the various branches and traditions. So I think that people will definitely enjoy starting to read them, and then, it's up to them. But Confessions of an Illuminati series was born out of a project we started 20 years ago, when for the first time I felt the need to come out of this network of secret societies, because I had been threatened also. So it was maybe a necessity also. And in the fall of 2006, I started a blog that immediately got the attention of people like David Icke. And soon after, I started the regular broadcast on various radios here in the United States of America. I was based at the time in Norway. And in fact, after a few threats, I ended up with an accusation for espionage, which led me to leave that country. And at that point, I went back to Italy, where I used to live. And in Italy, I continued my work until I actually reached an agreement with a publisher to publish these books in Italian. But before that, I went with my present wife to Japan, and I became big in Japan, like Alphaville sings. And it happened with a few books. I sold over 200,000 books in Japan. Now, today, we are at 500,000 books. So I guess that and in various languages. So finally, 10 years ago, actually 11 years ago, thanks to Brad Olson, I published my first books in the English language. And now with my wife, we have our own publishing company called Cursum Perficio. So this is briefly, in a nutshell, my story.
Fantastic. Actually, you answered some questions that I was going to have. So that is great. I appreciate that. So I have some questions prepared, but if this conversation just goes on its own, that is fantastic. So I'm going to start with, how does someone even cross paths with that kind of network, with those kind of secret societies? Is it something you yourself seek out, or is it something that quietly starts noticing you first? Are you kind of like chosen and then brought into this?
Well, it depends what kind of secret societies, or societies with secrets. Because, for example, Freemasonry, everybody knows about Freemasonry. Here in the United States, we have even the compass square at the entrance of every town, so it's not really a secret. But there is actually secret societies that recruit, and they do it. They recruit people based on their bloodlines, on their background, at times even on their bank accounts. So it depends. This is my latest book, and actually in September 2008, when I didn't yet publish any books in any language, a friend of Jeffrey Epstein, Matt CC, who was either his brother or the creator of The Simpsons, people still don't know, sent him a suggestion to go and check my website. That's why my name appeared also in the Epstein files. Fortunately not as a bad guy, but simply as an expert on the New World Order and secret societies, because that's something I've been doing for a very long time. And I have sacrificed a lot for that. I mean, I got an accusation of espionage in Norway. From 2008, I never saw my son again. And then after that, in Italy, when I started to publish my books, they arrested me, tortured me, and all kinds of things. So in the end, I had to flee Europe altogether in 2019. And nowadays, I'm an American citizen, happily naturalized in this great country of ours, which has a constitution which guarantees for people like me the possibility of doing my work without any hassle. When I was in Europe, I was really fearing the police coming through the door, and it happened more than once. So it's a really a joy for me to be able to really focus on my work. And in fact, I've been a lot more productive here in the United States than I was possibly when I was. Though I must say that the project Illuminati Confessions took many years to elaborate and then put together, because it was an act of courage that led me in 2006 to publish my first blog. But then I realized soon after that the internet was already full of trolls, of censorship, of people who might, have just a reaction of disbelief in front of what I was proposing. But I was the first actually so-called whistleblower from the Illuminati that was not only claiming it, it was bringing you the photos, the documents. And so my books, on the contrary of people who have preceded me, actually have documentation, photographic evidence, and sources that are credible rather than simply speculation. And that means that it silences the people who, might want to debunk Zagami. And now people focus more on what I'm bringing them rather than me. And that is really, I'm glad that is what is happening now. Because when I was only on the internet without the books, it was a little bit tricky, because people might troll you in a million ways. And they really came up with the most evil accusations and all kinds of things. So when I actually instead bring out the evidence, the material, the documentation, at that point, they all silence, And then I did another thing. After I was back in Italy, because I had been living in London since 1994, then in Oslo from 2003. So I had not been in Rome for a long time. Once I went back to Rome, I also reawakened my order, because I had co-founded an order in the Principality of Monaco in 1999, the Order Illuminatorum Universalis, and then reawaken also the Masonic rite of the strict Templar observance, which is a Christian Masonic rite. And that gave ulterior credibility, because then people could see that I was actually doing these things, inviting people in my lodges, having I was trying to actually fight them from within at that point. Though, of course, it didn't work out, because in the end I had to leave Europe altogether. But I made some attempts, at least, in changing things around.
Do you believe that these trolls and also all these accusations and like the accusations of espionage as well was in fact these secret societies?
Well, the accusation of espionage was clearly coming from a secret society background, because I had written and I had brought evidence in my blog about the secretary of the Ministry of Defense of Norway being inside the lodge of the Ordo Templi Orientis, worshipping the Book of the Dead. So, I mean, that is definitely clearly something connected to what I was doing. On top of that, they also threatened me with the cousin of my then first wife, who was a police guy who wanted to join the intelligence services. And a few months after I started this this website, he came to me and said, listen, they are monitoring you. And they told me that if you don't close down everything, they're going to eventually arrest you, which is what happened later on. But fortunately, I was lucky enough to have, at least a few connections in Italy to get me out of that mess, and also connections here in the US. I never went back to Norway, of course, but I haven't even been back to Italy since 2019. So it's like the life that I conduct is made of sacrifices, and that's why my books have also an ulterior credibility that maybe other people don't have. Or people, when you can write about all kinds of topics, and today on the internet you can find all kinds of topics as well as all kinds of books just spread through Amazon. But then it's about the credibility. And I have tried also in my latest book, which has been a great success, because it's the first book that actually discusses Jeffrey Epstein not only from the political or maybe the side of the pervert who does things for Israel, of course, involved with intelligence service and so on. This book actually brings you into the story of a secret society that spans centuries within Judaism, which is the Sabbatean Frankist. And it actually brings evidence that then was confirmed by the various publications of the Epstein files. So I came out with this book at the end of October, but then everything that came out after October confirmed what I wrote in the book. So everybody's like, wow, let's go and check the book. And I didn't even know I was in the files, of course, at the time. But not only that, it really shows this book that Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein were Sabbatean Frankists from that background. I mean, there is an email with Ariane de Rothschild in which she says, our family, the Epstein family, the Rothschilds, were even behind the support of a young Adolf Hitler. There is actually emails where they discuss Peter Thiel involvement with secret societies, where they discuss the secret society of the Zodiac, which is a very exclusive secret society in New York. And like I said, everything was already written in this book, which is now, of course, getting a lot of attention. But it's not only, a book about the background of Jeffrey Epstein within this heretical secret society. It's also about fighting anti-Semitism, because this is not about generalizing all Jews. This is about sectorializing and compartmentalizing. So then you actually receive the appreciation, like I receive every day, of many Jewish readers, many Orthodox Jewish readers, many Israeli readers who tell me, what you have written here is actually what we're fighting in our communities every day. So
I think that's very important that you say that, Leo, that, you're not like, it's not a blanket. You're not saying, oh, all Jews are bad or anything like that. That's really important. And I feel that the ones who you're trying to pinpoint, and you're like, okay, yes, these ones, they're the ones who are coming out and saying, oh, you guys are all anti-Semitism. That they want your statements to be blanket statements, because then they have something to fight against. But you're like, no. It's you. It's these ones.
No, actually, you're being specific. I knew that accusation will be coming. And so from the very start, I write, without falling into the trap of anti-Semitism in the description of the book. So then it just cuts it. And I had problems in the past with the Anti-Defamation League, so I didn't want to have problems with them again. And I wanted to be honest about the fact that Israel, unfortunately, has been born out of compromises. But you have to show those compromises, and to show those compromises, you have to really dig deep in the history of Judaism, in the history of Zionism, and, of course, in the history of secret societies, because there has been a heavy involvement of the Sabbatean Frankists, just as the Jesuits. And in fact, the other book that preceded the Rise and Fall of a Frankist Monster, which came out just when the late Pope Francis basically the week he died, I terminated this book, and everything I wrote about also future Pope and the way he would behave, it was all so correct to the point that this book became also another great success. Because
which book is that one?
This
Leo?
is volume 12 of my confession, and it's
okay.
History, Secret Societies, and the Politics of the Jesuit New World Order and the Luciferian Court. Now, in my depiction of all these secret societies, they are led on top by two groups, the Sabbatean Frankists and the Jesuits. And of course, they are connected, but you have to read this book to understand better, as you have to read maybe probably all of them to understand the complexity. Because when people think they can grasp this reality with one page on the internet, it's just demented. I mean, what can I say? I mean, I feel for them. I mean, they're very naive. You have to understand, they're called Illuminati because these are people of very high intellect. The history of this secret society spans centuries. It involves some of the most important figures in culture, in religion, in politics, in business. And these are the people who we call the elite. There is a reason why they are the elite and why the majority of folks are not the elite. So it's very important for me to clarify this point.
I would love to focus in on that book right there. The Secrets of Illuminati 12. It seems really important right at this time that we do that. Also, if we want to hit on Epstein as well, I am okay with all that. Like what we're talking about right now.
The two things actually connect, and I explain you why.
Yes, please.
Because the Jesuits is an order which is almost 500 years old. The founder of this order, which is the Society of Jesus, or also called the Company of Jesus, Ignazio Loyola, was accused himself of being a conversos or a marranos. And his secretary was actually a conversos. What does it mean, a conversos? What it means to be a marranos? These are things that I also have to explain to your audience. In the Iberic Peninsula, we had the Moors, so you have Islam, you had the Jews, and you had the Catholics. At one point, with the arrival of the infamous Spanish Inquisition, they wanted to purge all the elements that were not Catholic, forcibly arriving to them at their doorstep and saying, well, are you going to become a Catholic, or are we going to chop off your head or send you away to some distant land? Some people left. Some other people decided to practice their religion in secret. And those would be called the marranos, which means pigs, basically. Because they will convert officially as, I'm Catholic, I'm a Christian, or even not only Catholic, but also to other forms of Christianity, because at that point you had also other Protestant. But we find that there was this way of protecting themselves. Crypto-Judaism was born, and then you had the conversos, who were supposed to be instead the ones who genuinely converted. Now, the Jesuits were born in this situation in which, in a very short time, they became the ones in charge of the Inquisition after becoming initially the ones who were persecuted. So how did Ignazio Loyola, a guy who basically went in front of the Inquisition 5 times, end up being the guy who brings in the new inquisitors? Now, it happened because the Pope realized in 1540 that the Dominican order, which was the one in charge at the time of the Inquisition, didn't have the occult skills that the Jesuits were having. The Jesuits were founded, let's say, formally, they got accepted by the church in 1540, but then 10 years earlier, they had created their original nucleus in Montmartre in France. There was, of course, Ignazio Loyola, who was forced to leave Spain for France because of the Inquisition, who was often investigating him because of his connection with the Illuminati, the Alumbrados. Now, the Illuminati of the time in Spain were picking up on all those traditions that were being somehow purged with the Inquisition. So we are talking about Islamic mysticism, Jewish Kabbalah, Gnosticism. This became the core belief. Let's remember also that it was from the Iberic Peninsula that many of those texts that then formed the Renaissance, the Hermeticism, the very basis of the intellectual force that drove the Renaissance. Well, it passed obligatory from Spain, because what happened was that when a long time before the Roman Empire collapsed, it left really everything in the Dark Ages, and there was no longer any connection to these distant lands, to these traditions. However, like I said, the Iberic Peninsula was that place where things were still alive because of all these different communities interacting with each other. And so the Jesuits were born, but their project was to the moment in which the Pope said in this castle, which is a castle outside of Rome in a place called Tivoli, he made this deal with Ignazio Loyola, and he said, basically, I need you for fighting the Reformation. We need to fight Martin Luther. We need to fight the Church of England. We need to have you because you are really a military order more than a religious only order. You see, since the forced disappearance of the Knights Templars, they were close. They were literally, the Grand Master bent on the stake. The whole order was left in shambles. Of course, they survived. They survived in my family. That's why I was then recruited later on, because the Lion family of my mother is counted with the Sinclair as one of the important families that laid the base also for the future of Freemasonry in Scotland, connected to Kilwinning, connected. So the Lion family is the family of the Queen Mother of England. So here we are talking, when they recruit somebody, they go through the history of your family spanning centuries. But at the same time, I don't want to elude anybody, because I know that there's a lot of people that go and say, oh, I have an ancestor here, an ancestor there. I'm going to have a DNA test, and suddenly they're going to all respect me because I am the bloodline of this and that. It doesn't work that way, guys. Forget about it. It doesn't work. I mean, it would be nice. It would be great, but it doesn't work that way. It works in a different way. It works like, of course, family connections. I was 23 years of age, and I got recruited by a family friend who was a Prince Aliata di Montereale, a family friend because this family has been friend with my family for hundreds of years. So it's not just, hey, hello, let's become an Illuminati. No, it doesn't work that way. So I got brought into a specific place. I got initiated. I got extracted. And then later on, I started this process, which brought me to be initiated. I mean, I was actually very eager to get initiated in many traditions of the West, or what we define as the Western initiatic tradition. And I was pretty positive about staying within the fold until 2003, when in one of my initiation, I started to see that there was human sacrifice involved, and that kind of, I draw a line there. I kind of draw a line. But of course, but then they didn't draw a line with me yet. So it was like an internal war that went on between 2003 and 2006. And then at that point, after I was threatened in June 2006, I said, okay, by the fall of 2006, I'm going to bring out my blog, and I'm going to start hitting hard on these people, because I don't have any, I was actually expecting them to kill me. I mean, they went to an extent, to such extent, I can just describe one thing. When I was gathering all the information on them, I had a Mac computer. And at the time, Mac was an impregnable computer. You couldn't get a virus. You couldn't get anything that they were able from a distance, because of their involvement with the NSA, with other, to literally blow up the computer in front of me. The actual,
What?
It blew up like that.
Holy cow.
I mean,
Okay.
I went to the Mac shop, and the guy said, I don't know if we can recover anything. Then it was a friend of mine who had been working with Mac for many years, who was in my lodge, who said, Leo, I'm going to help you out to retrieve the information that you have that you had in that computer. And fortunately, we retrieved it, and then we were able to bring it out in this blog partially, and then later on in my publications. So imagine what kind of situation. I mean, there was, I had special SWAT teams arriving with machine guns in Norway, pointed them at my head. Suddenly, me, kept down, and there were all kinds of things that happened that are out of this world. So I think that when people say, but Zagami makes things out, they have to first understand my background, read the books, and then they will probably understand that they were wrong, even thinking that.
Definitely.
And in fact, I must say that, like I said, these days, I don't even focus any longer on the Confessions of Illuminati series. Is finished. It's of course a piece of history which I leave for posterity. Now we'll be focusing though on all the various subjects which I brought up, so I can, dig deeper and deeper in them and make out of them some great essays, like the one that I published on Jeffrey Epstein.
Wow, that is a lot. I do have a question. When you brought up human sacrifice and you're like, that is it. Was it something that you saw or that you were informed was going to happen?
It was like I was getting initiated to a specific degree. It was the 8th degree of the OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis, of Aleister Crowley. And you are given this, you are initiated, you have an initiation, which is, of course, a symbolic way of opening the chakras, of leading the way to what they, an ulterior form of awareness, of illumination, whatever. But then you are given instructions, which are simply instructions which you are given. And at that point you go through and you say, there is this mass that is celebrated with the fetuses and stuff. I said, people eat the fetuses in a mass. So, I mean, when thing got to gross me out, I said, no, thank you. I'm not into this, any longer. It's not of interest for me. But I repeat, it's like, people who are in the lower degrees of that, I mean, that is only one of the secret societies which I belonged to at the time. But I was also responsible for the Fraternitas Rosicruciana Antigua, which is very popular still in Central and South America, founded by Arnold Krumheller, who also was connected to Aleister Crowley, because Aleister Crowley was elected chief, let's say, of the worldwide Illuminati in the middle of the 1920s in Germany. And that is when he became in charge of the Ordo Templi Orientis, which had been created between Austria and Germany. And the interesting thing is that their teachings came from the secret society that was filtering the teachings of the Sabbatean Frankists, the Asiatic brethren of a guy who brought these teachings in this Asiatic brethren was Moses Dobruska, who was the son of the cousin of Jacob Frank. Now, for those who don't know what the Sabbatean Frankists are, they are simply, and here I have to again describe everything in a nutshell for reasons of time. In the 17th century, Shabbatai Zevi declared himself the Messiah. Then in 1666, he was forced by the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire to join Islam and to reject his prior beliefs. But then he remembered what the Conversos and the Conversos and the Marranos did. So he said, okay, I'm going to convert to Islam, but then I'm going to continue in secret my practices, even if, they have nothing to do with Islam. And that is the beginning of the Dogme. So he lost the majority of his followers because he had more than half of the Jews of the world following him as the Messiah. But his sect became highly influential, based mainly in what is today known as the island of Thessaloniki. And at that point, they became history changers, like the successor of Shabbatai Zevi was a guy called Baruch Russo. Still, he wanted to keep this Jewish heresy within the Islamic frame of the Ottoman Empire. But then his successor, Jacob Frank, who claimed to be the reincarnation of Shabbatai Zevi and was recognized as such in Thessaloniki, he came from Ukraine, from Podolia, the area which includes Ukraine, Moldova, and then parts of Romania. And then Eastern Europe, you can go up to. All that area had been affected by the Sabbatians, but it got even more affected by Sabbatian Frankists, because then, of course, Jacob Frank started his own branch, gradually distancing himself from simply a, conversion of Islam. He said, no, that's not really what I'm aiming for. Let's go back home, and I'm going to convert and bring 20,000 of my sect members to convert to Catholicism. And that is the Sabbatian Frankists became even more insidious than the Dogme in a way, but they still kept connections with the Sabbatians, of course, because they were a Sabbatian, part of the Sabbatian heresy. And historically, what happened was that they became extremely influential, though, in the realm of secret societies, because the knowledge that they were bringing, this heretical form of Judaism, which had to do with the Kabbalah, but a Kabbalistic interpretation that was completely satanic and reverse, and a total disrespect of the Mosaic laws. Just to give you an example, one of the ancestors of Anton LaVey his ancestors, his family came from Thessaloniki, from Salonika. He was a Sabbatian, Frankist, before being a Croilian and then the founder of the Church of Satan. So just to give you, a brief insight, but even the Ordo Templi Orientis of Aleister Crowley was claiming in its official documents, which I received when I was initiated, that they were deriving from the Asiatic Brethren. So the level of influence that the Sabbatian Frankists had, and imagine the mentor of Madame Blavatsky was a Sabbatian Frankist from Poland, Max Theon. The mentor of Eliphas Levi was another Sabbatian Frankist from Poland. So every single person behind even the word occultism, because it was popularized by Eliphas Levi, or everything that happened with the Theosophical movement, which led the basis of modern Satanism in a way, because then Crowley could have not activated his popularity if not through the large network of the Theosophical Society within the then very important British Empire. So here we have definitely a situation of great influence. And for that reason, when I also put together my essays, my work, I also do it always from my own experiences and background, which keep on resurfacing, because I joined the Freemasons in Italy. It was an irregular branch. You have regular and irregular. The regulars are the one recognized by the United Lodge of England. So in 1993, I was an irregular. Okay. In 2003, I regularized myself inside the headquarters of the United Lodge of England in Kirby Lodge 2818, which was a lodge that was actually, I think, is still to this day one of the most establishment lodges you can have. And then I, in the meantime, I had to become the head of this Aula Lucis Cariostro in London, directing the whole of the fraternity, and also working for the Società Rosicruciana in Anglia, which has also an important branch in Canada and in America. I also was part of the Canonbury Masonic Research Center with the Marquis of Northampton. So this is part of an elite unit of about 50 Masons who were really serious about Freemasonry. So I was an historian within that context. I wasn't simply a guy who got initiated, but I was eager to get initiated because I think that you need to experience certain things. So I went to the Middle East to experience certain initiations, Sufism, directly from the source, and at times also, of course, risking my own life in the process, because if you are in Russia, in the middle of nowhere, or you are in the Middle East in the middle of nowhere, or you are nowhere, I mean, it's always a little bit risky, no? But in the end, I think that God had plans for me. So if I'm still here, it means that he likes my work.
I think you're doing good work, like exposing and bringing light to the Illuminati. It's kind of like the irony of that statement. I think it's very important that people actually come to understand this controlling hand that is hidden. Like you said, there were so many that were operating and being these consultants that there's many out there that are actually controlling the direction of our world. And many people don't believe that. They'd rather just sit in front of the TV and just watch their Netflix. Yeah.
But because there is also been a lot of disinformation that has been deliberately spread. For example, in regards to Freemasonry, the typical form of Freemasonry you find, for example, here in the United States, is more or less a social endeavor of sorts, where you go to a town and you have the sheriff who is a Freemason, the doctor is a Freemason, the lawyer is a Freemason, and then you are simply part of the town's establishment by becoming a Freemason, just as you would become part of the town establishment by joining the Rotary Club or the Lions. So it's more of a kind of, while instead, if you are joining a irregular, between brackets, lodge, or a influential lodge within a specific obedience that focuses on certain things, it's a different thing. It's a completely different matter. There is Masonic lodges even in the Vatican, and people don't know about. And very few people have access to these lodges, of course, because they are within a place where officially Freemasonry is banned. So it's very important for people to realize that, like, today, Freemasonry is no longer as relevant as it used to be. There is secret societies that are much more relevant, and there is also think tanks like the World Economic Forum, the Club of Rome, the Bilderberg. These are much more influential. In Volume 12 of my Confessions, I explain the secret history, Volume 12, I explain the secret history of the Bilderberg Club, how it was created by the Jesuits and the Freemasons during the last part of the Second World War, to then be of support to the birth of the European community and then the European Union. So, but the thing is, I don't make these statements out of thin air. I bring you the names, the addresses, the photo, and everything. So then you can put your mind at ease, because once you go at the end of the book, you always have hundreds of references and sources. Now, when somebody tells me, oh, but you have put as a source a blog, that blog has been verified, cross-referenced with another source before I insert it. So I might add to, for example, I don't base my truth only on one source because you see, one good thing about my past is that I was involved in the music business and I was very popular as a DJ, record producer, but then I was also a journalist. And my mentor in the world of journalism, Dino D'Arcangelo from La Repubblica, which is one of the most read newspapers in Italy, taught me a lot of how to do proper journalism. So for me, when I came out of this, let's say, call it New World Order establishment of sorts, and that I knew that I could attack them because I knew how to attack them. It wasn't just simply somebody spilling the beans. I think that brought me quickly the accusation of espionage I had to suffer in Norway, because at that point they were like, okay, this guy's not taking any of. Yeah, imagine at one point I had the Secret Service coming to my home, and the intelligence, Norwegian PST is called. It's like the FBI. They came there and they were like, okay, you go into this room, you into this other room. So me and my wife were separated. We were threatened and all that. The day after, I went on American radio and I said what happened. I didn't care about, silencing myself. And I also at the same time knew that they will in 24 hours eliminate my website. So I asked a friend of mine who was familiar with the technology to reverse it, to put everything that I had there uploaded into another site. And so to get this thing to survive. So, I mean, there were moments though that were not easy. I mean, there were moments in which I was, they brought me like, they finally had convinced my first wife to leave me because they offered her something, probably, I don't know, but it worked out. And at that point, I found them at my door and I said, where is the mandate of the judge? Don't worry, come on with us on the car. And they made me go around the building with the car, around this whole area with the car until they received the judge's permission. So they arrested me even without a mandate, waiting for the mandate to arrive. So it is pretty serious when you think about it. But going back to what I was exposing, when I was living in Norway, I was exposing the most powerful form of Freemasonry there is in Scandinavia and probably in the Western world, because they hide very well. They are known as the Swedish Rite. It's only open to Christians, which is very unusual for Freemasons, which call themselves universal. And since the unification of the moderns with the ancients open to all religions, that's how also the English Empire managed for a long time, to have a balanced society. Because if we follow Kipling's poetry piece, I mean, you can put on for the volume of the sacred law that the Masons consider the guiding light of the lodge, the main guiding light of the lodge, they will put either the Bible, but then at that point the Quran, and many other religious books. Nowadays, people show up with all kinds of idiotic religious books for their Masonic initiations. So there is not that prerogative that you have to be Christian. That went out of the door a long time ago, 2 centuries ago to be exact. So I think that today, Freemasonry, though, after having been very influential during what we can define as the golden era of fraternalism, in which you had groups like the Odd Fellows, groups like many other were created. I mean, and of course, some of them survive here in our universities in the United States, where they still have, the Skull and Bones or other groups, similar groups, which are still kind of, because those groups maintain that elitarian mentality. You have then Prince Hall Freemasonry, which is very influential within the music business because it was founded for the black folk. It was a liberated slave who founded African Lodge after having been liberated, Prince Hall, that's where it starts. And today, all the music business, every single record producer is part of that. And there is, though, irregular branches of Prince Hall, which are pretty dangerous, because in the 1990s, the United Lodge of England forced Prince Hall Freemasons to regularize themselves. But then, of course, there is still, then even within that kind of milieu of African Americans, those who want to have their own very elitarian lodge. And so they at times work outside of the borders or the constraints, let's say, of regularity. Because in regularity, Freemasons shouldn't discuss neither religion, neither politics. In regularity. But when irregularity is another thing. In any case, think tanks, 100 years ago, I explain in volume 8 of my Confessions, in particular, which is based on a very detailed study of the entertainment world. So, as I was myself a record producer, I wanted to bring out this experience. I put together, now I don't know if I have it, it's over there. I have so many of these books here. I have to show you that. It's a volume 8 of my Confessions is basically a book where I talk about Hollywood, I talk about the entertainment world, and the influence that these secret societies have. The Sabbatean Frankists in particular, they became almost the founders of Hollywood, of that Hollywood Babylon. In fact, who are the major producers of Hollywood? Sorry, Jewish people, but they're not your usual Jewish folk. But they are pretty liberal, pretty secularized, pretty progressive. That is Sabbatean Frankism. That is the fruit of the Jewish Enlightenment, as they say. So it's very important here to understand that when they say Illuminati, the Illuminati of Adam Weishaupt that were formalized with this name in 1776, constituting themselves in Ingolstadt, where there was also very important, as in this context of Jesuitism, because the Jesuits had there one of their leading universities during the fight against the Reformation. So Ignazio Loyola, the founder, had sent there his best. But then Adam Weishaupt came in when the Jesuits were persecuted even by the church. At one point here in the Vatican, they realized that this order was pretty dangerous. So then they kicked them out. In the 1770s, they were kicked out of the Vatican after they had been kicked out from Portugal, from, every single empire didn't want to have anything to do with the Jesuits. They were too dangerous, too insidious, too manipulative, And so what happens? That the Pope gets convinced that he has to do a bull to kick them out. Well, at that point, the Jesuits survived thanks to the protection, unlikely protection, because he's an Orthodox, of the Russian Empress. But where did they survive is very indicative. They survived in Podolia, where the Sabbatean Frankist heresy was spreading as wildfire. And in fact, the crazy thing is that Jacob Franco was, after he got these 20,000 Jews to convert to Catholicism, he got arrested by the Catholic Inquisition, and he got sent to a monastery, which I explain also when people, for example, see the famous photo of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein blessed by a Polish Pope, they are like, what the heck is that? Why? But then this Polish Pope was a guy who revered what? The Holy Mary of Czestochowa, the Black Mary. And Jacob Frank, for 12 years, almost 13 years, he was in the monastery of the Holy Mary of Czestochowa. And that's where he has his illumination to include and transform the Holy Mary of Czestochowa in his own vision of the Shekinah or Shekinah, which is the female aspect of God in the Jewish tradition. So then, in Jeffrey Epstein context, because Jeffrey Epstein spent a lot of time in the Vatican. And this also came out from the emails, and people were like, how did you knew all that from? I said, don't worry about it. It's like
forget about it.
Jeffrey Epstein was a guy who came from a family who himself, says to Arian Rothschild, was the banking families who has a palace in the center of Vienna. In fact, if you go on the internet and Google, you will find the Epstein Palais in the center of Vienna, still today. It's a palace. Fantastic palace. Just go and check it if you want, and you can see it.
Yeah, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to pop that up onto the screen so everybody can see that. Yes.
His great-great-great-grandfather, Leopold Epstein, was the guy in charge of the National Bank of the Austrian Empire, then Austro-Hungaric Empire. And then his ancestor, there was another ancestor who was the guy who built that palace. But then what happened is that we all know that in that period, there was the first big depression. And so if you go and check, the Epstein lost all their money and they were forced into moving to America. But the interesting thing is that there is two branches of the Epstein family, and the way they made money is very interesting. But nobody talks about this. The interesting thing is that nobody wants to talk about the roots of Jeffrey Epstein, even after his own emails have proven that he is not the son of nobody from Brooklyn, but he's the guy who comes from one of the most powerful families. There were two branches of this family, one in Poland, where the Sabbatean Frankists became very influential. The other one was in Vienna. But before that, it was in Prague. Prague became also the stronghold. Prague was the city of the alchemists, was the city of magic, was the city where the rabbis had attempted the making of the golem. So this was a very important place. The making of the golem, by the way, it's very important because it influences also the birth of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And that's why this cover, it's not just a simple thing. When it says, it's Frankenstein, Franken as Jacob Frank, because the husband of Mary Shelley was himself a member of this Illuminati. And it was very symbolic. In fact, Professor Frankenstein, where did he take where did he study? In Ingolstadt, the University of the Illuminati of Bavaria. So here it's all connected, you see. It's not like there is an element.
It's crazy how much this is all connected. Like
Sure.
You start pulling all these strings and drawing in all these strings.
It's crazy. And I guess that personally, another element that facilitated my, let's call it meteoric rise within the Illuminati, because in a short time, of course, I started in 1993, but by 2003 and by 2006, I had become extremely influential for a guy who was very young. Now, people say today, if you are 26, you are too young to do anything. And I remind them, Adam Weishaupt founded the Illuminati. People back in the days of 26 were geniuses. They were changing the world when they were 20. Today, they are. It's just the wrong way of extracting them in these academic situations, these universities that seem to be a construct of the society and a system which is though failing because once they come out, they are not even capable, most of them, of doing anything good with what they have learned. It was a very different situation back in those days in which you had to quickly realize who you were, in which you had to fight wars already at a young age or, recruited in some military. And so things were very different. And people were also much more intelligent. I'm sorry to say, but that's the truth, because they were not, checking every 2 minutes their mobile phones or finding their information on Google. they would be going to libraries, they would be studying, they would inventing things.
I could not agree more with you on that, Leo. I always say that I believe technology is dumbing us down. Instead of us being more proactive and going out there and finding things, we're just kind of like and playing mobile games, even though we have, access to the worldwide knowledge. We'd rather just sit there and swipe away and watch these short reels and things like that. We're becoming dumber and complacent as well. And I agree with you. When people were 26, hundreds of years ago, things happened. Even 100 years ago, things were happening. Now, 26-year-olds old, it's spring break. We're going out partying and we're going out drinking and Mardi Gras. And it's all about partying and just keeping them under some sort of influence, under some sort of drug influence. They're a slave population. They're a slave to these entertainment, to the lust, to everything else that goes with that.
But I mean, Adam Weishaupt, born in 1748, his father died at a rather young age, so he had to quickly learn about the world. There were, of course, family friends who aided him, who helped him in his idea, but then he was also quite lucky because of the persecution of the Jesuits, left open the faculty of canon law, which had always been an exclusivity of the Jesuits. And so Pope Clement the 14th suppresses the Society of Jesus in 1773. And at that point, Weishaupt became a professor of canon law, a position that was held exclusively by the Jesuits until then. And then in 1975, he was introduced to the empirical philosophy of Johann Georg Heinrich Feder of the University of Göttingen. And these are, he was like 26, going 28 when he then eventually on May 1st, 1776 founded the Illuminati. But I was the same. When I was 23 years of age, I decided to practice the magic of Abramelin the Mage. I decided to lock myself up for 6 months and conduct a ritual which is deemed dangerous by most people. And I came out alive, barely alive out of it, ready to conquer the world, because surviving that ritual for me and actually to be able to do that ritual in the heart of Rome brought me to a knowledge of certain things. So when I arrived in these Illuminati environments of various secret societies, Fraternidad Saturni, Ordo Templi Orientis, Fraternidad Soror Sacra Antigua, the Illuminati of the later on of Di Bernardo, but then many other organizations, I had this direct experience of something that was very strong. Now, I don't advise anybody to do what I did, because it's very dangerous to play with these grimoires and to evoke things, but also to invoke things, because there's a difference between evoke and invoke. And when you invoke, you literally bring them inside. So then the only way of bringing them out is through an exorcism. So then I needed to be exorcised at one point, and I was exorcised. I was exorcised first in the Catholic tradition, then later on, after what happened in Norway in 2003, I ended up being exorcised in Egypt by Madame Fula of the Coptic Church. And then I got also exorcised in Turkey in the Islamic tradition. So I say I purify myself in every way possible and imaginable, because I was filled with demons. But the experience that I had was the experience that brought me to then write these books. But think about it. My experience was from a very early stage. Being initiated at 23, doing the magic of Abramelin the Mage. Earlier on, I opened my first book of magic when I was like 10 years of age. my grandmother, Felicity Mason, had brought this book of thought of Aleister Crowley to my father, and my father said, I want this book, you have it. That kind of thing, because he was not interested in Crowley, but then he became interested later on. I must say that he had in his library every single grimoire and dangerous book possible and imaginable. But when I was 10, I was so eager to study magic that in the back of a comic book, I found the publicity for a Beacon book to buy, and I ordered it as a present for passing, some kind of exam at school. But then I understood that the book, Beacon Magic, was called, I think, The Power of White Magic, was a little bit too wishy-washy for me. So I went into my father's library, and then I kind of dig much deeper into some serious stuff.
So serious stuff.
Yeah, then I started to dig into all the grimoires of the 5th, 16th centuries. And it was like, but I must say that in the end, even if I escaped barely alive from all my experiences in this sector, I still think that this experience is important for warning people of the dangers of all this. Because you were talking about now the Vatican has just called, for a new yearly event filled with exorcists. They say that every diocese should have an exorcist. There is highly requested because people are simply playing too much with Satanism, with the Ouija board, with the tarot cards, with the spiritism of sorts, magic. You mentioned in Mexico, brujeria, but then you have all forms of animism that are present in Central and South America. Because the Jesuits arrived and they didn't eradicate what they found. Simply integrate. That's what the Catholic religion has always done. Let's integrate. Let's bring them into the fold. What is the name of your deity? Okay. We make him a saint. Or we transform the Isis into the Black Mary. We transform Aphrodite into another. It becomes all part of Christianity because Catholicism was born in Rome. And when Rome accepted Christianity as their state religion, well, it came at a cost. They couldn't simply eradicate thousands of years of traditions of other religions. If you think about it, St. Peter's is built on the temple, on a temple of Mithras. And the Mithraic religion. All this is, but we as Freemasons, I was a 33rd degree. I had to study all that, but I had to also study many other things when I joined the various secret societies that, in a way, it was enlightening. My young age was spent, though, with probably the wrong values. But we are all drawn towards Lucifer, towards rebellion when we are young. It's that is, let's say, the big problem. That's why a lot of artists, unfortunately, die young. They call it Club 27. they all die, So that is one of the things that I underline in the volume 8 of my Confessions. In any case,
Leo, I have a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind. I know we're getting close to wrapping this up here. You're talking about exorcism. I just want to bring up the point. The city that I live in, the state that I live in, is one of the number one in the world for the most exorcisms. So for an example, in 2022, they did 38,000 exorcisms in the state.
This book, volume 6.66, it's a book. It's a very important book. I don't know if you have read it or you have the possibility to at least have a look at it. But this book is very important because here, The Age of Cyber 7, Artificial Intelligence and Robotics, is also a book that talks about exorcism. It mixes it explains the dangers of technology in relation to demonology, but it also explains how the Vatican the post-Vatican II means the post-Second Vatican Council, which ended in December 1965, ushered in a new era. And the last victim of it was in 1999, the reform of the exorcism. When the exorcists like Father Amort or Corrado Balducci, other exorcists in Rome, saw what was done to the exorcism, and I have here actually exposed prayer after prayer what they omitted in 1999 and why they had to return to the original form, because it wasn't effective. At one point, it was like Father Amort said, well, you are basically giving us a gun with no bullets. I mean, you're giving us, it's like we don't no longer have the power. So they have to go back to the Roman Rite traditional exorcism to have an effect on those demons. First of all, the ritual of exorcism has to be conducted in Latin. There is no way you can conduct it in any other language. You can eventually try, if the case is not too strong, you can try with some prayers known in Latin. I did it myself in a case, because then I became myself involved in exercising a couple of times. So I had they called me up in the middle of the night once in a situation which now I don't want to start telling you more about because it will go above our time. But I ended up with this black fellow who came from Africa, who was completely possessed, because voodoo comes from Africa. The tradition, the animistic traditions of Africa are very intrigued with black magic, with some crazy stuff. This guy was literally levitating from the bed. It was like, whoa. And I arrived there simply with a holy element, which was a piece of the bandage of Padre Pio, the famous saint now, who was also an exorcist, who used to have the stigmata, so a piece of his bandage, and I recited the prayer, and the guy was fine. There were other exorcisms in which instead we had to go through the whole process. So, I mean, it is definitely possible to exorcise also for somebody who is not formally a priest, though I had been also made a priest within the lodges, because they have their own Gnostic lineages and priestly lineages of Antiochian stuff that they give in certain Masonic rites like Memphis and Mizraim, which are deemed mostly as irregular, but still practice. And also in these so-called Gnostic churches, there is people who practice exorcism and so on. But it's always been a very challenging experience, fighting the devil, fighting these demons.
Yes, I agree. That's it's a forever battle that keeps going on. One last question I would like to touch on. We don't have to go too far into it. And we don't want to give out too much information, but that ritual that you performed on yourself, you said that, you almost didn't make it out. What was that ritual? What had anything to do with the ethers by like Aleister Crowley, or what was that ritual?
Aleister Crowley did the magic of Abraham in the Mage because his mentor was MacGregor Matters, who had translated for the first time in the English language the magic of Abraham in the Mage. And so Aleister Crowley his mentor was in the Golden Dawn, MacGregor Matters. And he realized that with this grimoire, he could get in contact with the secret chiefs, with the invisible masters of the situation here, the people who are behind we can call him the interdimensional, the extra dimensional. We can call him whatever you want.
That would be like the 19 calls or the 19 keys.
No. That is John Dees.
Yes, correct.
That came after. Came after. John Dee, of course, came before Crowley, and Crowley claimed to be the reincarnation of Kelly, who was his scribe. But we are talking here about the magic of Abraham. The magic of the Mage is a ritual which lasts 6 months. He started it in front of Loch Ness, of the lake of Loch Ness, where in fact soon after the monster was they started in his home there, Boleskine, which is still to this day the Mecca of the Thelemic cult. The people who pray various times a day in the Thelemic religion founded by Crowley, they have to position themselves towards Boleskine rather than Mecca like the Muslims do. Now, in Boleskine, he started the ritual, but then soon after he found this woman, Rose Kelly. He decided to interrupt the ritual and go on a honeymoon. And then within the Great Pyramid of Giza, he did all things that are not supposed to be done. Interrupting the ritual is not supposed to be done. Then he goes into the Great Pyramid and he used the invocation of the Boneless One, which was another ritual he had translated and published with MacGregor Matters, this Goetian ritual. And he started to recite it there. And of course, at that point, the wife gets possessed and then he gets delivered eventually the Book of the Law. He claims he has completed later on the magic of the mage in China. He completed it in China. So I instead did the magic of the mage in Campo dei Fiori, where there is the statue of Giordano Bruno, where Giordano Bruno was sent on the stake. And it's regarded as one of the most important magical locations in Rome. And I had the luck of these two women who were adopted by Einstein, two Jewish women who rented this place to me there. Mazzetti, Sorelle Mazzetti, the sister, you can find them on the internet, Sister Mazzetti, were adopted during the war by Einstein because they were Jewish. They had to escape because their parents were sent to the concentration camp and so on. So they were friends of my father. I needed a place that was particular because they owned a puppet theater. And once a week, they will bring in the children that will then at that point refresh the ambience and bring in the angelic energy which I needed. It was pretty strong, and it's a ritual which I barely survived. But the result came, and it was pretty impressive. But of course, it will take another episode to describe that.
Definitely. Wow, Leo, this has been fantastic. And like I said, I think, I don't know, were we doing like an episode 2, 3, 4?
Sure. We will do it in the next few months. But,
yeah, for sure.
I will advise for people who want to know more about the magic of a man in the mage in relation to my work to go and check out what Volume 3, which I published with Volume 3 is the one which I focus a little bit on this topic. I talk about it, of course, in other books too, but that is where I really focus on it. And of course, it's very impressive the way that you are able to dominate then the demonic once you are finally through this ritual, which is what I was trying to do. The problem is that these are basically aliens. So at one point they appear in front of you and you are petrified. And at that point you're like, ah. But of course we will be discussing that another time. And thank you so much for having me on. God bless you, your audience, Rai.
Yeah, Rai, for sure. And Leo, one last time, where can they find all your books and, to find you as well?
Today we discussed a lot of the Jeffrey Epstein book, which is the latest bestseller, The Rise and Fall of Frankie's Monster. We also discussed, of course, there is a trilogy dedicated to Cyber Satan, which is volume 6.66, volume 7, and volume 9. Cyber Satan is another topic which I would like to touch in the future. You can find all my latest articles on leozagami.com, together with the links to my books, which of course you can find also on Amazon. And I think that people needed to read these books and get them in paperback rather than in digital form, though they are available on Kindle because I know it's handy. Remember, guys, paper, scripta manent, as the Latin used to say, because we are living in uncertain times, and soon, the whole internet might be wiped off, or something terrible will happen, and we will no longer have access to these things, which, so it's better to for the old fashioned books. At least I prefer it because
I do
I'm
too.
like very much.
Yeah. Well,
Great.
Leo, thank you so much for your time. And I really would definitely love to talk to you in the future, in a couple of months' time. I'd definitely love to have you
Sure.
back because I think you have so much information. And we just.
And I will have, in 2 months' time, I want to anticipate already now, I will have a great surprise.
I'm looking forward to it.
I can't say more.
Okay.
Take care,
Fantastic.
man.
Thank you so much,
All the
Leo.
best. Fiat lux, as they say.
Let there be light. I like that. That's a great way to end. All right, everyone. I want to thank Leo for coming on. Wow. What a show. So much information. So much darkness with it, too. Those secret societies they're infecting everything and everyone as well. They're in every aspect of our world, and we have to be aware. Leo is doing his best. He's writing those books, and he's letting us know what is truly out there. And I think with that information, we can actually just start to understand. So if you guys enjoyed this show as much as I did, make sure you leave a comment, give us a review. Let me know if you guys want to see Leo back. I sure do. I definitely want to see Leo back. That was just amazing. And I think we're just scratching the surface on it. Now, again, if you enjoyed it, go check out his website, buy some of his books, really do that. I'm going to be buying probably book number 12 on the Confessions of a Illuminati. I think that one's going to hold a lot of information, and I want to take that all in. So until next time, everyone, keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home.
Beneath the stars where shadows grow, the Nephilim's echoes whisper low. Bigfoot roams through the forest deep, and Dogman prowls where the brave won't sleep. Across lost history we wonder why, seeking the truth that time tried to hide. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks, in the void of secrets a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Codega's flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks, in the void of secrets a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Codega's flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. Legends rise from the Earth's deep core, a lost legacy we can't ignore. With every step, the veil grows thin, revealing worlds where the strange begins. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back